Let's be consistent.
Welcome to the Key to Consistency podcast. I am your host, Rakeyia Collins, and on today's episode, we're going to be focusing on how we can build consistency in our relationships. So, we're just going to go ahead and dive right in with what, first of all, is a relationship. Let's go ahead and define that because I don't want you guys thinking that when I say relationship, we're just thinking about your intimate relationships. We're really talking about all types of relationships. So, by definition, a relationship is any kind of association or connection between people, whether intimate, platonic, positive, or negative. And so, with that definition, the first thing that we're going to be exploring is when you are consistent in your relationship, that level of consistency really contributes to trust and it contributes to reliability in your emotional connection, right? Before we give an intimate example, let's give an example if you have a pet, right? And you come home to your pet. The relationship that you have with your pet, believe it or not, because I used to have a dog, I know one that pet love is extremely real. So if you've never had a pet before, this example may not be as applicable to you. But if you've had a dog, a cat, truly any animal that you've taken care of, you understand that when you are trustworthy, when you walk them the same time or around the same time every single day, when you have that emotional connection with them and you guys lay up together, whether you're laying in the bed and they come on the bed with you, or if you're on the couch and they come on the couch with you, just having a space and an environment where you are one way every single time with your pet, that begins to build that trust and that emotional connection. And so you know that if that is true for your relationship with your pet, how much more weight does that hold when we think about the relationship that you may have with your significant other or with your family member, right? When we think about trust, are you consistently there for them, right? Like, do you show up when you say you're going to show up? Can they rely on you, right? Like, are you the type of person who's going to be consistent in your mood, or are you up and down and whatever way the wind flows, they may not know who they're getting, right? And I get that sometimes those type of things aren't necessarily determined by you. It may be, you may have a bipolar disorder. It may be something that is going on medically. If that is the case, I am certainly not referring to you because I am certainly not a doctor to be able to give that type of advice. It is purely if you know within yourself you can be hot one minute, cold the next minute, and there is nothing medically or psychologically wrong with you. You just have drastic mood swings, and you just, depending on how you feel, you exude that, right? That is one of those things that when we think about reliability of your mood as well is very, very important. When we think about, building that consistency in your relationship, do you constantly back your words with actions, right? It is so easy to say, I love you. Again, thinking intimate relationship, thinking platonic, thinking all types of relationships. It is so easy to say, I love you. But are you backing up that I love you with action? Are you saying, thank you for the little things that they do? Are you expressing gratitude? Are you smiling when they come in the room? Do you give them a welcoming presence, right? And again, I want you guys to really think about these things in your day-to-day lives and how you can adopt them, right? I know it's not always easy to back up your words with action because you have a lot going on. We all have lives. And again, going back to our episode about time, we all sometimes feel like there's not enough time in the day. But one thing that you'll learn, especially as you continue to listen to these podcasts, is that we are all about small and consistent steps, right? So even if you wake up one day and you normally, wake up, get yourself prepared for your day. If you have children, you get them prepared for the day, and then, you are on your way, right? What about taking, 3 to 5 minutes to go back in the restroom if your partner is still getting dressed and kissing them on the cheek and wishing them a great day, right? Like those type of small things that we can do that takes a little bit more from us, they have a huge, huge impact, right? And so we want to make sure that our words are being backed by action. We want to think about when we're having these, interactions in our relationships, that we are focusing on consistent communication, being that presence, that it really helps foster a healthy and fulfilling relationship when you have consistent communication. Whether you guys decide, Sundays are family days and we're going to spend time with the kids in the morning, we're going to put them down, or we're going to get a babysitter to come in, and then we're going to have the afternoon to ourselves. We're going to go to a park. We're going to go do whatever we want to do together, because that's going to be our time to stay in contact with one another. It can be so easy to fall into a rut because it's like, again, life kind of gets into a rhythm, and you get into a rhythm of, man, I have to do X, Y, and Z, and you're so busy knocking things off of your own to-do list that you find that now you live in a home with other people and you just feel like you guys are all just roommates, right? You don't know what's going on in your children's lives or in your partner's life because you have turned the relationship, not intentionally, right? Because you've been working on providing and being there and facing the world, but you've turned the relationship into one that is more, not as intimate as you'd like it to be. You don't have a certain level of communication with your kids or with your spouse. And so that's where staying in touch, and it doesn't necessarily always have to be, in person. Sometimes, again, as I mentioned on a previous podcast episode, having a family group chat just to be able to chat with them, right, about what's going on in their lives. Or if you are in, let's say, a long distance relationship, making sure that, rather than you guys texting a lot, you may, enjoy FaceTime conversations where you can see each other's face because you don't get to see each other that often, right? So just doing those small things that really make huge, huge changes in how we can show up and be consistent in our relationships. And of course, we do want to make sure that we are, when we think about communication, that we are clear and upfront in our communication, right? That fights and disagreements, they're going to happen in any relationship. You may even find yourself upset. If we go back to our pet example earlier, you may even find that you are upset with your pet because they did something, right? But always remember, and this is going back to our anger example, that lashing out abruptly without explanation because you're on that escalation of anger is unkind and it is unsettling. And while you can do something and you can get over it, that doesn't necessarily mean that the other person is going to get over it. There are certain things that I've done in my relationship with my partner that have happened 3 or 4 years ago, right? But when we get into disagreements, he said, well, I know because you have the potential to do X. And he can say that because I've done it before, right? So again, just making sure that when you say certain things to people and do certain things to them, that we're not lashing out, and that the moves and the decisions that we make in our relationships when it comes down to being consistent in our communication, that they are well thought out and that they are intentional. I always find it a lot easier, especially in my relationship, to be upfront, right? And being upfront looks like when we are both even keel, when we're not upset about anything, just having a regular day. Although you don't want to talk about something that angered you because you're both in a great mood, it is important to bring up those topics, because if the same situation continues to happen and you guys don't have a game plan to strategize for it, because again, no matter who you are, no matter if you're married for 10, 20, 30 years, you're always going to have disagreements, but you have to have a game plan in order to tackle those disagreements effectively. And so making sure that you set those expectations and that you are clear on your feelings is really going to be crucial in making sure that you show up consistently in your relationship. So, hopefully, for our first topic of communication and really showing up in our relationships, you guys have taken away this action item of regular communication, being sure that you have, weekly quality time or even daily check-ins. I know sometimes every single day it can be hard to make sure you check in, but it doesn't matter what that check-in looks like as long as you're doing something on a regular cadence that benefits you and that benefits your family as well. This episode is sponsored by yours truly, Rakeyia Collins. And if you need to be reminded to stay consistent throughout your entire day, there's no better way to do that than to have visual cues throughout your day, right? And for those visual cues, visit our merch shop. We have phone cases that remind you to be consistent. We have coffee mugs that remind you about the importance of consistency. And so visit our site at thekeytoconsistency.com, and I hope you enjoy the rest of this episode. Awesome, guys. So, our next topic that we're going to be addressing, again, along that same vein of consistency and relationships, is being authentic and being present, right? I cannot express the importance of showing up as your true self consistently in your relationships. I know I mentioned it earlier, but this is why reliability is so important. If you find that you kind of ebb and flow with the wind and, external factors can really hinder you internally and they really make you feel a way, it can really change your mood. Like, again, because this is outside of consistency, as a woman of faith, I found that when I have myself truly grounded in the Word of God, that is my strong tower. He is the place where I go and I run to and I feel safe. And so I used to be the type of person who would, whether I'm scrolling on social media and I see something and it makes me, cringe on the inside, or I read something like an article and it made me angry, and I would carry that and not even realize that I'm carrying those things. But it shows up in my interaction. And now my fuse is that much more shorter when I come around my family or my friends and I have an air of like, something is wrong, right? And so we want to make sure that we show up as our authentic true self. And if your true self is grounded, then you don't have to worry about ebbing and flowing with the wind. And you don't have to worry about people not really knowing the version of you that they're going to get. Because I think that's the toughest part about a relationship, again, whether intimate or platonic, when you don't know the version of that person that you're going to get. That's where authenticity comes into play, right? And you can really begin to reveal yourself to another person. Of course, this requires step one, which is you knowing your authentic self, right? But when you are at that place where you can go to step two and you can really be authentic with another person, you are genuine with them. You are vulnerable with them in your communication and in your interactions with them. Really, what I'm trying to say to sum it up is you are more congruent with your values, because your values and your behavior are in alignment. What you feel on the inside is consistent with how you act and what you say to others, right? And again, going back to my example of faith, because I spend or intentionally try to spend a lot of time in the Word, I understand that love and showing love and expressing love is a major part of God, right? God is love. And so it's hard, especially again, living in the world that we live in, to always show love in every single situation, because sometimes you don't necessarily want to. Like, you want to feel other ways. But I found that, again, because I am trying to intentionally ground myself in my faith, it allows me to show up in a more consistent manner. And when I am my authentic self, I find that the little things that I was once stressed about, they don't stress me like that anymore. It really allows me to show up and be joyful and be loving in moments that would otherwise be very challenging, right? And it really shows others that, okay, wow, like, she has a level of consistency and reliability within her in the way that she shows up in the world, right? And I found, as I was studying about, authenticity and about being present in your relationships, that there is a fun fact that if you hug the person that you love, psychiatrists at the University of North Carolina found that when couples embrace, they had an increased level of oxytocin, which is the hormone that is responsible for lower stress levels and mood boost. So again, even if you're not in a romantic relationship, hug someone that you love, right? Hug your pet, hug a friend, hug your neighbor, right? Hug someone, and you will immediately experience that increased level of oxytocin, which again is going to lower your stress and increase your mood. And who doesn't want that? Who would not love, an immediate mood boost? One thing that I do want to talk through, as well as we're on this vein of authenticity, is that authenticity really requires you to be transparent. And we talked about, communication before, but again, all of it kind of being lumped into one. If you are not clear and you are not transparent with your partner about what bothers you, especially when we're having those emotional conversations and you're trying to be vulnerable, but it's hard for you. And I get it. Transparency is not easy. I personally struggle with it a lot, especially because I was in other relationships before that I couldn't be vulnerable in, and that I wasn't, in a safe environment to be transparent. But I will encourage you and say that that's where support groups and therapy and just being more intimate with yourself, all of that will help you open back up again, because nothing is more terrible than to walk around life being a shell of yourself because of something that has happened to you in the past. And I get that that is a lot easier said than done. We all generally, in some shape, form, or fashion, have had some type of trauma, some type of event that has happened to us. But it is important to heal so that way we can be transparent and we can show up every single day as the people that we're supposed to be, right? When you're transparent with someone, you're able to have that honest and direct communication about how you're feeling while remaining respectful. And again, the pause was for dramatic effect, because I know that there are some of us out there who, yeah, we can be transparent, all right, but it's going to be in a way that may come across as disrespectful to the person that we're communicating with, right? So we want to make sure that while we're being honest and direct about how we're feeling, when the role is reversed, we're also practicing active listening. We're also being able to listen in a way that demonstrates, I am truly hearing you. I am truly listening to what you have to say because I value you. right? And if we do that consistently, that is going to lead us perfectly into our third topic of nurturing the emotional intimacy in these relationships. Active listening is a great way to make sure that the person that you are, whether you're intimate with or platonic with, is really feeling like, okay, this is a person that truly shows up and that truly cares. Because when you actively listen to someone, you are practicing empathy and you are showing understanding. And I want to caveat that as well to say, when you actively listen to someone, that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to have a response for their situation. Sometimes active listening just means that you listen. It just means that you're there. It just means that you are a presence for whatever that person may be going through. Right. And so, one way that you can nurture your emotional intimacy as well is just by being more appreciative of this particular person, whether again, family, friend, partner, pet, whatever relationship you are focusing on as you're thinking about these topics, making sure that you are appreciative of that person. It really changes the game when you're with someone and that person is genuinely grateful for who you are, genuinely grateful for how you show up in the world and how you show up with them, right? Apparently, in my studies, I found that the Journal of Sexual Medicine says that the feeling of euphoria that we get when we fall in love is the same feeling that you get from people who use certain substances. Both actions trigger the release of happy hormones like dopamine, oxytocin, and adrenaline that give you a natural high that you do not want to come down from. So, thinking about that through the lens of a romantic relationship, when you fall in love, you are experiencing a level of euphoria that is the same feeling that someone gets when they are partaking in a particular substance, right? That is powerful. And to be honest, that is probably why a lot of us love that feeling of falling in love, because it is very addicting to want to be in that space. And while you can be in a relationship with someone for 6, 10, 20, 30 years and still have that feeling by practicing the things we've mentioned earlier, right? By doing the active listening, by being there, by showing up, by being reliable, by being honest and vulnerable, right? All of those things, while they do require more of you, at the end of the day, is this worth it to you? Is having a thriving relationship worth it to you? If it is worth it, then you have to commit to growth. You have to commit to personally growing and doing some self-reflection in your relationship, right? Whether that is you sitting in the car for an extra 10, 20 minutes and thinking about how you can make your relationship better, not how you can change the person that you're with, right? That is an entirely different podcast, but we're not focusing on them. We are focusing on you. What can you do? What can you work on? Do you need to work on how you address conflicts and challenges? Do you need to seek professional help? Right? Like, what do you need to do to increase your personal development in order to contribute to the growth and the longevity of your relationship, right? Making sure that you're practicing that active listening and that empathy and that understanding, right? Putting yourself in someone else's shoes without judgment and genuinely trying to understand how they feel. Y'all, we are all human and we are all out here just trying to make it, to be honest with you, just trying to make it and just trying to have great positive lives, right? There was a saying a few years ago, and it may still be around, but it's like people would always say, I just want to be great. That's all we want to do. We just want to be great in every single facet of our lives. And since relationships play such an integral part of our lives, we want to make sure that we're showing up in our relationships the best way we can, 100% authentically ourselves. And so, as we approach the end of today's episode, I do want to leave you guys with a Bible verse. Today's verse comes from Ephesians chapter 4, verses 2 through 3. And it says, "Be completely humble and gentle. Be patient, bearing with one another in love. Make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace." I believe, given our topic for today, that Bible verse speaks for itself. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of The Key to Consistency. We'd love for you to review this podcast wherever you are listening to it. Please feel free to follow us on Instagram at thekeytoconsistency.com. And if you enjoyed this episode and you found something that was beneficial to you, of course, please share it with a friend and someone else that you think would benefit from starting their own consistency journey.